العالمين والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على النبي الأمي العربي القرشي المكي المدني الهاشمي صاحب قاب قوسين محمود رب المشرقين والمغربين جد الحسن والحسين النبي الحرمين والإمام القبلتين والرسول الثقلين الذين سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في العالمين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتبارك وقدمه الفداء واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم أجمعين. أما بعد فقد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يا علمت وشيعتك هم الفائزون. وقال صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم في موقع آخر علي مع القرآن والقرآن مع علي لن يفترقا حتى يرد علي الحوض. صلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد. هنا معروف إمام حسن واشتغال عليه الصلاة والسلام وسائر هذا الصلوات على محمد. And to hasten the reappearance of our awaited Imam beside the Dao Salawat Muhammad. So, slowly but surely, we're coming to our destination, our goal. It's been a week since I've been with you, and there's another week, or less than a week left before the holy month of Ramadan will no longer be with us again. So we have reached this point of having discussed success and its desirability and some of the conditions of that success. We mentioned, after having spoken about the desirability of success, we mentioned one of the initial conditions of achieving that success was humility in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to consider one to be humble was one of those important conditions. Then we mentioned the importance of recognizing belief and righteous deeds as a way to achieving that success. And yesterday we referred to the important area of obedience to the Imam as a means to achieving the success. And today we want to build on that and look at a very important area which is part of this success building exercise and an essential component that we have in order to get towards that success. So in this regard, we start from where our religion itself begins from. If we look at the principles upon which the religion itself is based on, we find that there are two important things that the religion itself has a basis on. And a few nights ago we referred to the fact that there are certain personalities throughout the history of Islam which have, and throughout history generally, which have this polarizing capability. People polarize around their character. Either they like them, they love them, or they hate that personality. It's a polarization around that character that the person has. And of course there's some reasons why that is the case. And we mentioned a few of them. Previously we mentioned the fact that when a person has a character which is so strong, then this polarization is inevitable. But as I say, the principles of the religion are based upon these two very important things which we want to refer to today. If we look at the statement of our faith, where we begin stating our faith, when a person says, what is it that is said by a person to make a statement about their faith? That first statement gives us an insight into what that religion is based on. We're saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. It begins with a negation of everything else. We don't say, I believe in Allah and not any other gods. We say, I don't believe in anything else, in any other deity, in any other person claiming to be God, except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we begin by negating all those false gods before we acknowledge the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the first statement of our beliefs. Similarly, in the surah that we're reciting at least 10 times a day in our prayers, we are told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that there are two paths. There is the path of those upon an'amta alayhim, on those whom we have done the favor upon them. We've done the ni'mah upon them. And then there's the path of those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry, maghdub alayhim, for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with them. For what reason? But there's two paths. There's the path of those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, and there's a path of those whom Allah is not pleased with. So, one of the most important conditions of achieving this success is the recognition of who my enemy is. I have to recognize, in order to be successful, who is my enemy, who is my real and open enemy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that أَلَمْ أَعْهَدْ إِلَيْكُمْ يَا بَنِي آدَمَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا الشَّيْطَانَ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. Did I not take a covenant from you, O Bani Adam, that you will not obey shaitan? Why? إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. He for you is your open enemy. You will not obey shaitan. Now somebody might say, well, who obeys shaitan? Who is doing the obedience, who is doing the ibadat of shaitan? So, in that regard, we have to again come back to actions. As we previously said, beliefs and actions is the action that is reflective over a person's belief, whether they obey Allah or they obey shaitan. However they act, we will be able to find out which is which. If a person acts in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes pleased with them, then they are obeying Allah. And if they act in a way in which shaitan will be pleased with them, then even if they say they're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're obeying shaitan. So this is one. This is what the Holy Quran is telling us about our enemy. In this regard, of course, when we talk about shaitan, we like to blame him for every wrong thing that we do. Whenever something goes wrong in my life, or I do a mistake or an error or a sin, I say that He made me do it. Even though when He comes to Rasulullah and they have a dialogue, He says to Rasulullah, I don't make anybody do anything. I don't make anybody do anything. All I do is I make the sin, I make the disobedience appear to be desirable. The only thing that I do is I make that disobedience appear to be desirable. And because it appears to be desirable, then a person goes towards it. And of course, shaitan is not just one person. There's multiple shaitan. And there are agents of shaitan. There are brothers of shaitan. No, ikhwan shayateen. They're the brothers of shaitan, the Quran says. They're the agents of shaitan, even though it's not him. In most cases, it is not him. In fact, again in the dialogue that he has with the Holy Prophet of Islam, he says that all these places where you see there's haram going on, these are nothing to do with me. These are nothing to do with me. These are people who are already doing my work. So I don't go there. I go to the places where my work is not being done. Maybe it's a lesson for believers as well. Shaitan only goes to the places where his work is not being done. So believers have to go to those places where their work is not being done as well, in order to counter what shaitan is doing. Inshallah, in a subsequent discussion we'll refer to that. We need to bear that in mind. But there are places where this haram is going on, shaitan is not involved. His agents, his people are doing the work for him. But what is the perception that we have when it comes to our enemy? We think that in the previous time, in the past, everything was fine. And that recently we have had these issues that have arisen in terms of our enemy. But that's not the case. The case is that in every time there's always been an enemy, and while the name and the identity and the persona of the enemy changes, what stays consistent is the way that they act. Just as the believers, their names and faces and personas change, but what stays consistent is the way that they act. Similarly, the enemies, their names and their faces and their personas change, but then what remains consistent is in the way that they act. In the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, not even after the Holy Prophet, in the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, there are, amongst the Muslims, there are two types of people. In the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, there are people who recognize the Holy Prophet of Islam, and they honor the Holy Prophet of Islam, and they honor his family. And there are people who've recited the kalima of the Holy Prophet. They've become Muslims, but they have no honor for the Holy Prophet of Islam. They have no respect for the Holy Prophet of Islam. Their behavior towards the Holy Prophet of Islam is not the behavior that the believers have towards them. This is in the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And there's many examples of that. I'll just give you one and we'll then go on, because I want to link that with our current situation as well. In the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, when the Holy Prophet of Islam, after having come to Medina, wants to go back to Mecca, he sees the dream, he goes towards Mecca with his companions, and the Meccans prevent him from entering. Instead, there's a peace treaty at Hudaybiyah. When the Holy Prophet of Islam signs the peace treaty, when he signs the peace treaty, a person from the side of the Muslims comes to the Holy Prophet and he says, "Are you really the messenger of Allah? Are you really the messenger of Allah?" The Holy Prophet says, "Yes, I am." And then he goes to another companion and he asks him, says, "Is he really the messenger of Allah?" He says, "Yes, he's the messenger of Allah." This person himself says that day I had such a doubt over the Holy Prophet of Islam that I never had a doubt like that before. This is in the time of the Holy Prophet. We're talking about in the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. After the Holy Prophet of Islam, what transpires, we mentioned in previous discussions as well. What happened to Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam? People refused to accept him as the brother of the Holy Prophet. People refused to even give salam to him. These were not people from other religions who treated Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam in this way. These were people who recited the kalima of the Holy Prophet. So from the beginning, there was a Islam which was based on the principles of the Holy Prophet. There was an Islam which was based on the principles of Hadith. And there was an Islam which was in opposition to that Islam. From the beginning of time, this is not something that arose 200 years ago, 400 years ago. No, from the beginning of the religion of Islam. Why? Because there are those who recognize what the religion of Islam is about, and there are those who have entered in the religion of Islam for their own means and benefits. And therefore we will see what happens as a result of that. So Amirul Mu'mineen's time is now the time where Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam has become the Khalifa of the Muslims. He came onto the minbar and he sat in the place where the Holy Prophet of Islam sat, and he said, "Alhamdulillahi ala ihsanihi, raja'a al-haqqu ala makanihi." Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's done a favor that He's returned the right to the rightful. The next day, two people, companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam, come to Amirul Mu'mineen. One of them is related to Amirul Mu'mineen. And so they come with the hope that Imam Amirul Mu'mineen will give them something from the Khilafah, make them a governor of a particular area. When they come to visit him, the story is well known. When they come to visit him, he's counting the money in Baytul Mal in order for it to be distributed. When they come, he asks them, "Have you come for an official matter or have you come for a personal matter?" And they say, "Ya Ali, we've come for a personal matter." So he puts out the candle. They ask him, they say, "Ya Ali, why did you put out the candle?" Amirul Mu'mineen says, "This candle was lighted with the money of the Muslims, and you have come to see me for a personal matter. This was lighted from the money of the Muslims, it belongs to the people, and this, you mentioned to me that you have come to see me for a personal matter. Therefore, I will not allow the money that is, the candle which is burning from the money of the Muslims to be burnt over a personal matter." Whatever reply they were looking for, they had received it. They knew that when Amirul Mu'mineen would not bear to burn a candle unjustly There's no way that he's going to give us something on the basis that we might be related to him. And that's a reminder that Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam and being his follower or going against him is based on principles. Amongst them was a person. The two people who had come amongst them, Zubair was a person who at the time of the demise of the Holy Prophet of Islam had almost given his life over Amirul Mu'mineen. But 35 years later, he dies on the opposite side, on the wrong side. On the basis that he doesn't acknowledge the principle that's necessary for defending Amirul Mu'mineen. It isn't because he's related to me or I'm related to him. No, it's because of the principle that he follows. So, this is what's happened after the Holy Prophet of Islam. That there is already a group of people whom the Holy Prophet of Islam had foretold about. We mentioned it yesterday. And this group of people have now taken this agenda of killing people, this agenda of forcing people to think in their way, my way or the highway. And now they are doing this to terrorize people in that Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam deals with them decisively at Nahrawan, and the vast majority of them are killed. However, it's not the end. Even if one of them remains, it is not the end of that matter. And of course, afterwards they become mainstream. They get power in different places around the world and they become mainstream. What happens and what is distinctive about what's happened in the 20th century is that the rules of the game has changed. In the past, if you had a group of people who had these kinds of ideas, they were limited to a small area and a small group of people. Today, the rules of the game have changed. Today we live in a different kind of world, in a world populated by nation states, in a world where communication and transport is much easier than it used to be in the past. So the rules of the game have changed, and therefore the difference now is that those rules, those things, those principles which were locked within the books have now come out. People are acting over them. And people are defending that injustice in the name of the religion of Islam. But it's not something new. Years ago, Imam al-Ghazali, leading scholar, was asked about Yazid. They said to him, what should be our opinion, what should be our belief about Yazid? And his reply gives us an insight into how severe this matter is. He replies, this is not my reply, Imam al-Ghazali replies, saying what? He says that we shouldn't say anything bad about Yazid. Why? There's a reason. He says the reason why we shouldn't say anything bad about Yazid is because if we do, then it will lead to the hatred of some of the companions. If we say something bad, if we are critical of what Yazid did, then it will lead to the hatred of some of the companions. Later the scholars come, they go even further in their defense of Yazid. And they say, Alayadu Billah, it is stated that Hussein alayhi salam was killed by the sword of his own grandfather. because he rebelled against the legitimate Khalifa of the time. Now, even if somebody says this, they write it in a book, even that is not such a mainstream influence. What happens is when that book becomes, or that principles, those teachings that are within that book become mainstream, it begins to be taught as something which is normal in the religion of Islam. And in the enthusiasm to defend the companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam, you get to a state where people say, well, if Yazid acted in that way in that era, we can act in that way, in this era as well. If Yazid went out and killed the family of the Holy Prophet of Islam because he was the legitimate Khalifa, so he could do anything, then today somebody will come and say, well, this person has claimed the Khilafat and now whatever they're doing is all correct. It's all legitimate. So we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that as a person who's looking for success, they have to identify the enemy. And not only they have to identify the enemy, they have to identify what's behind the enemy as well. A follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam is one who not only identifies Shimr as the one who's killing Imam Hussain alayhi salam, but also identifies that Yazid is the one who's giving the order to him to kill. Follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam identifies that Abdurrahman ibn Muljim is the one who's killing Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, but there's somebody else behind him who's provided him with the weapon to kill Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. So this is important, that even in this day and age, we see that if a group of people who were relatively unknown, who up to now constitute less than 0.1% of the Muslim world, but yet they're getting all this attention, they're getting all this importance, for everything that they're doing is being amplified and multiplied, and as if all Muslims are responsible for it, then we have to identify the Shimr of the era, but we also have to identify the Yazid who's behind him. Because the motivation and the way that a person becomes like that is how? How does it go from a person who wanted to defend his life for Amir al-Mu'minin salam to then come out in opposition and fight him? Or for a person who had participated in a battle with Amir al-Mu'minin eventually becomes the person who kills him? What happens? How does that happen? How does it happen? How do you go so dramatically wrong? We give all these examples, these factors, he gets influenced by desire and by money and by this and by that. But ultimately, are these things by themselves sufficient for a person to go towards killing a person? No, the strongest motivation is the wrong interpretation of the religion. That person genuinely believes they're doing the right thing. And that is without that motivation, a person cannot get to the state of killing people, of beheading people, of being so merciless towards people, about making people slaves, about dehumanizing people. This comes from this wrong interpretation of religion. This comes from the fact that a person thinks that they're doing the right thing. They believe that they're doing the right thing. They believe that by saying that everybody else is not Muslim, they're doing the right thing. I always say that the Holy Prophet of Islam came to the people in order to make those who were disbelievers into believers. In today's era, we've got people who make believers into disbelievers. The Holy Prophet of Islam came to make people into believers. Today, people are making believers into disbelievers. If we look at Amir al-Mu'minin Islam's life, and it's an astounding fact in his life, that he comes up against all these different kinds of people. In the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, he comes up against the Meccans, he comes up against the Jewish people, he comes up against the Romans, he comes up against all these other people who attack the Muslims. After the Holy Prophet of Islam, he comes up against the Muslims, he comes up against companions of the Holy Prophet of Islam. But at no stage does he state that anybody who claims to be a Muslim is not a Muslim. Even though he knows who is a believer and who is a hypocrite. Yet, at the conclusion of the Battle of Basra, which we famously call the Battle of Jamal, the people who have died from the other side, those who have been fighting Amir al-Mu'minin salam, he orders his army bury them because they were Muslims. It's an obligation over us to bury them because they were Muslims, they recited the kalima. And also he teaches us the ethics of how to fight. The ethics of, in today's day and age, it seems like an oxymoron that we might associate ethics with war, ethics with fighting. But Amir al-Mu'minin salam says, in other traditions they might tell you all is fair in love and war. In the religion of Islam, there's ethics when it comes to love and there's ethics when it comes to war. Imam Amir al-Mu'minin salam, when he goes out into the battlefield on the day of Khandaq, what does he say to Amr ibn Abdul? Amr ibn Abdul has come and he's challenged the Muslims. Amr ibn Abdul has come and challenged the Muslims and he said, I'm giving you a win-win solution today. If you come out and you kill me, you will go to paradise. And if you come out and I kill you, then you will be shaheed, you will also go to paradise. Still nobody comes out. Eventually, you know the story, eventually Amir al-Mu'minin salam comes out into the battlefield. At that, Rasulullah says, بَرَزَ الْإِيمَانِ كُلُّهُ إِلَىٰ شِرْكِ كُلِّهِ. Today I've sent out the whole of Iman against all of shirk. When Amir al-Mu'minin salam comes into the battlefield, this is Amr ibn Abdul, who is an acclaimed enemy, without any shadow of doubt an enemy of the religion of Islam. Yet he says to him, I always give my opponent three options. Either you accept Islam, or you leave the battlefield. If you don't accept these two, then we'll start fighting. Amir al-Mu'minin is saying, Amr ibn Abdul there's no greater enemy of Islam at that time than him. Yet Imam is saying, I'm still giving him the chance to go. If he leaves the battlefield, I will not chase after him. Here we've got people acting in the religion of Islam, chasing after people, killing them, beheading them, and then saying this is in the religion of Islam. The Amir al-Mu'minin tells him, leave the battlefield. He doesn't leave the battlefield. The battle takes place. In the midst of the battle, he spat on the Imam's face. The Imam left him. In the midst of the battle, he spat, Imam left him. Came back, he overpowered him again, and then he killed him. To show us what? Show us that remember, when you're doing something for Allah, nothing else should become involved in that. Your personal anger and vendetta shouldn't become involved in that. On the day of Khaybar, when he goes out to face Marhab, every single battle he would go out, he would say, I'm the son of Abu Talib Ali. Every battle, when he would go out and introduce himself, this was the tradition of the Arabs of the time, when they would go out and into the battlefield in single combat, they would introduce themselves through poetry. It's called Rajaz. So in every Rajaz, Amir al-Mu'minin used to say, I'm the son of Abu Talib Ali. Except on the day of Khaybar. On the day of Khaybar, he came out, and when Marhab came to face him, he said, no, Marhab said, all of Khaybar knows that I am Marhab. And for 39 days he would come out, he would say this, and the armies would disappear. On the 40th day, Amir al-Mu'minin comes there, and when he says all of Khaybar knows that I am Marhab, Imam Amir al-Mu'minin replies to him. And he said, أَنَا الَّذِي سَمَّتْنِي أُمِّي هَيْدَرَ. I'm the one whose mother named him Haydar. So why did he do this? What's the background behind this? Remember, we're talking about the ethics of fighting. When Marhab was young, he saw a dream. In the dream, he saw a lion came towards him and ripped him apart. He woke up, he was very distressed seeing this dream. His mother was an expert in relating dreams. So he said to his mother, this is the dream I saw and I'm very distressed. What does it mean? His mother said, fight everyone, don't fight the one who's called Haydar. He said, don't fight the one who's called Haydar. So of course, he knew this and his mother knew this. When Imam Amir al-Mu'minin said, أَنَا الَّذِي سَمَّتْنِي أُمِّي هَيْدَرَ, he remembered. He remembered that his mother had said that fight everyone, don't fight Haydar. Why? Because if you fight him, what will happen to you is what happened to you in that dream. So Marhab begins to leave the battle. Marhab leaves the battle. At that moment in time, our friend Iblis is always there to help. So Iblis comes to Marhab and he says, where are you going? He says, this is Haydar, and I was told, fight everyone but don't fight Haydar because you will not survive. Iblis says to him, how do you know it's the same Haydar? It might be somebody else. What's going to happen? You're going to go back home and they're going to ask you what happened, and they're going to tell them that I left the battlefield and didn't even fight. Then people will laugh at you. That you're such a fearful warrior and you left the battlefield, you didn't even fight. Anyway, so he comes back, and then what happens is well known. Amir al-Mu'minin cuts him in half and he's finished. The fort of Khaybar is conquered. But the lesson is in this. The first lesson in the ethics of fighting is that if Imam Amir al-Mu'minin had come into this battle and he had said, I'm the son of Abu Talib Ali, Marhab would never have known that this is the Haydar for whom I was not told not to fight against. Imam Amir al-Mu'minin says, no, it is beneath me to deceive even the one who's coming to fight me. If he wants to fight me, he should know all the facts. If after that he still wants to fight, then it's up to him. But I will not deceive the enemy even. Number one. Number two, which is very important, inshallah we'll leave it there. The rest of what we want to discuss, inshallah, tomorrow. The second thing is this. Is that the mother of Marhab was a mother of non-Muslims. She had told her sons, don't fight against Haidar, because if you fight against him, you'll be annihilated. Yet, the mother of Muslims wrote fighting against Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. The mother of non-Muslims said, don't fight against Haidar because you'll be annihilated. The mother of Muslims wrote an army against Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam. Now what would happen to those people who died on that day? Who will be responsible for that? And whatever answer I'll give for that will be the same answer I'll give for in today's day and age, where people are justifying the killing, justifying the torture, justifying these inhumane practices in the religion of Islam. Why? Because they left the key towards success, who is Amir al-Mu'minin. The Holy Prophet of Islam said, Ali and his Shia are the successful ones. This is the way towards success. If you leave them and you go and make your own path, then this is what will happen, because you went against what the Holy Prophet of Islam told. The Holy Prophet of Islam said, this is the way you have to follow. This is the man who's teaching you the ethics of what to do, how to do things. If you leave them, if you abandon them, then you will end up with this kind of situation. You will end up with a situation where people are killing Muslims, Muslims are killing Muslims. You will end up with a situation where people are beheading Muslims, where people are saying Muslims are not Muslims. And all of that is taking place in the name of the religion of Islam. All of that is taking place in the name of the religion of Islam. For that, it was essential for Imam Hussain to go towards Karbala and draw the line in the sand and say that from today onwards there will be a Hussaini Islam and there will be a Yazidi Islam. But it should be manifestly clear what the Hussaini Islam is, because the Hussaini Islam is about love, it's about compassion, it's about sacrifice. And the Yazidi Islam is about all those opposite things. It's about greed, it's about wealth, it's about the dunya, it's about oppression, it's about torture, it's about inhumanity. And those up to today who take inspiration from the Hussaini Islam are ones who are still offering sacrifice, who are still offering love, who are still have their hearts open. And those who are inspired by the Yazidi Islam are still doing what Yazid did all those years ago. So this is important for us to understand why people acting in that way this is what Yazidi Islam is about. And this is what Hussaini Islam is about. And if I'm a follower of the Hussaini Islam, then I have to keep doing what Hussain alayhi salam did for as long as they keep doing what Yazid did. For as long as they keep doing that, I have to keep doing this in order to make sure that people recognize the true and real Islam. Inshallah, we leave it there. The rest of what we want to discuss, inshallah, will be in the coming nights. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow us the wisdom to recognize real Islam and to be the adherents of that Islam. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect followers of Ahlul Bayt al-Islam wherever they are in the world. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our awaited Imam and to make us amongst those who serve him. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد